Smile, be, chat, join for networking.
My name is Jo Clayton and my business is called Jojo Cocoa, where chocolate is fun. Now, this is the story of a rags to chocolates person. And as with all good stories, you have to start at the beginning. So, once upon a time, I was born in Salford in Manchester. I was actually born in the same hospital as Brad. But unlike Brad, I didn't stick around for very long. In fact, we were there for 3 days. I was born to a single parent, and I think the most politest, you could describe my mother as nomadic. But in truth, she was a wild child of the 60s. She was a down and out hippie. So we lived all over the UK for the first 11 years of my life. And when I say lived all over the UK, we lived in squats. These are places that tend to be boarded up. You're not supposed to live in them. So we would either break in the middle of the night, that's when it was really adventurous, or in broad daylight and just hope that nobody called the police. We also lived in communes where there were lots of other hippies. And the most fun places we used to live in were festival sites. And there's a true family story that goes that one festival that we were living on, and my mum was selling muesli, so we had a bit of money coming in. The Who were headlining, and they landed in a pink helicopter at one side of the site, jumped into a pink limousine, and were driven across to the back of the stage area where we were. I have no idea what we were doing in the back of the stage area. My mum probably blagged us in. And there we are. My sister at this time is crawling across the field, and Keith Moon runs to go up onto stage, trips over my sister, and just goes flying. Now, I don't know if that's a true story, but I want it to be. So this is obviously not what we would call a normal upbringing, okay? We're moved on all the time. I barely remember going to school. I think I went to maybe 2 or 3 in those first 11 years. But I was a real bookworm, and I loved stories. So I was a little bit self-taught, but my mum, I think, also used to encourage us learning about the world. By the age of 11, I had 3 sisters. One was closest in age to me, 18 months younger, and her name's Emma. And then there were 2 little ones. They were 3 and 1. And so I sort of became the main carer, babysitter, did the shopping, did the cleaning, cooking, all the rest of it. As again, I didn't know that that wasn't normal. It was just something that I got on with. And my mother had this brilliant idea that we would all join an Indian religion. And this Indian religion is called Sannyasin. And if you haven't heard of it before, and why should you, it's the one run by the guy who became popular for having 8 Rolls Royces. Okay, you heard of him, Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh. Now, Bhagwan had an ashram in India, in Pune. So my mother's second brilliant idea was that we were all going to go and live there. So what does being a Sannyasin mean? Well, first of all, my mum sat me down, because she was very liberal, bit of a hippie. Jo, how do you feel about being a Sannyasin? I went, absolutely not. I do not look good in orange. They had to wear all orange clothes. They also had to change their name to an Indian name. So you stopped being Jo and you became Marprem Dyer or Marprem Shanti. And I didn't want to change my name. The other thing you had to do was wear a necklace around your neck called a mala, and it had a locket with a picture of the guru, the Bhagwan, inside it. So I didn't want to do any of those. The sister closest in age to me kind of looked at me and I went, just say no. So I kind of decided on her behalf. So that kind of split the family a bit. We've got 3 orange people, and then we've got these 2 non-orange people. And this idea about going to India was all well and good, but we didn't have any money. But my mum managed to get some from somewhere, and we all had our passports done. And then Emma, my sister closest in age to me, pointed out, because she does know her dad, she'd like to go and see him and spend some time with him. So I've always been in Emma's life, obviously being the older sister, so that family knew me quite well. So it was decided that the 2 of us would go and we would stay down in Kent. We were due to go for a 2-week holiday. It lasted 5 years, because whilst we were down, the boyfriend that was charged with the passports rang and said, she hasn't left me any money. So the family then had to think, well, Emma is the natural child of one of us, but this other girl, the +1, what do we do about her? So at 11, we were told we were going to go and live with them in Peckham in South East London, not the nicest area I've ever lived in. And there was a sort of, whenever people say to me about my past, I just say I'm adopted because it's easier, but I wasn't adopted. We applied for papers called guardianship. They were sent to the ashram, my mum signed them, and then I was automatically involved in this new family. Now, don't forget, I've been used to running around on festival sites and breaking into squats. Suddenly, at 11, there's structure. There's a bedtime, there's meal times, there's school, there's homework, there's just a completely different way of living. So I got on with it, because you do, don't you? One of the things I really remember first when we moved in with them was they had carpets and lampshades and all the stuff that I hadn't got used to, because when we were moving around, everything we had to come away with us in a little bag or a box. So I stayed in Peckham for 5 years. I went to school for the first time. Didn't do brilliantly at school because I missed out on quite a lot of formative education. But I got a handful of qualifications, and my first job was working at McDonald's. The glamour. So I knew I didn't want to be at McDonald's for the rest of my life, but unfortunately I didn't know what I wanted to do, I think is I've heard of other people saying. So I took the decision to just fall into things. So as I saw a job that I liked, I applied for it, and I saw a job advertised for holiday reps working overseas, and I thought that would be brilliant. And it was. I went overseas, I was promoted very quickly, and I stayed overseas for 5 years, living in Spain in the summers, skiing in the winter resorts. It was an absolute blast. And the skills that I learnt from that role are really transferable. You're looking after people, you're organising them, you're selling them excursions, you're organising excursions, lots of customer care. And I excelled at it, I don't mind saying I did. I also then bummed around in Australia and New Zealand for a year after that. So the wanderlust that my mum has obviously stayed with me. But then I decided it was time to settle. So I moved to Brighton and I decided to start my first business. And my first business was a virtual PA. They were called concierge services. So I would have busy people that didn't have time to do stuff, and I would do it for them. And I loved that because I was helping people. After 3 years of being this virtual PA, I thought, okay, I'm not actually making money. I've looked at the accounts closely and it's time to kind of get a proper job. And someone I'd met networking was working as a PA in American Express. Now in Brighton, where I was living at the time, American Express have their headquarters there. So I was interviewed and I was actually given the job as PA to one of the vice presidents. And they said, we haven't given you this job on the strength of your CV, which is no surprise, but we've given it to you because of your work ethic and how you've come across in the interview. So I had a fantastic 3 years with them, but when the recession hit, I was made redundant. And part of the counselling, part of the redundancy package was that you have counselling. They were like, you will now find out what you want to do with your career. And I was thinking, I wish I'd had this when I was 11. Would have been so useful. So one of the things that came up, I think it was the second session, I realised that just, even though it wasn't my fault that I hadn't been properly educated, it was one of my biggest regrets. So I made the decision there and then that I was going to go to university and get a degree and prove to myself that I was clever. So I had to do an access course, and then I ended up in Sussex University doing an English literature and drama degree. And the reason I chose that is because I love reading books, and it is said in my family I can be a bit of a drama queen. So I'm doing this lovely degree, and I've gone from choosing jobs that I want to do and I'm good at to getting 50% for my first essay. I was devastated. And it was just the hardest learning curve of my life. 3 years of trying to get my grades up, improve my writing and fit in. I was a mature student. Everyone was half my age. It was hilarious. But I did well. I worked really hard. I also had a mortgage at the time because I've got my own flat down in Brighton. And I had 4 part-time jobs. I don't think you're supposed to have 4 part-time jobs when you're doing a full-time degree. But I was cleaning a couple of mornings a week, and then I was doing school runs and childcare for a couple of friends that lived down there. And a friend of mine knew I was struggling a bit, and she said, there's a company that wants to employ chocolate workshop teachers, and it's weekend work. What do you think? And I said, well, I don't really eat chocolate. And she said, don't tell them that at the interview. So I said, okay, applied, got the job, and because it was weekend work, it was perfect. I didn't have to skip seminars, I didn't have to worry about not doing the school run. So I threw myself into it. I mean, that was 5 years ago, and I loved it. I loved teaching people. I grew to love chocolate because the company only worked with green and blacks, so I learned what good quality chocolate tastes like. Plus, I just loved working with the groups. It really, I felt it brought out the best in me. I had a really good time. But at the end of my degree, I have managed to not only not be repossessed, which I thought was a bonus, but I actually managed to get a 2-1. So I was absolutely chuffed. I'd achieved my goal, I'd proved to myself I was clever, and now what did I do? I was kind of back at square one, not knowing what I wanted to do when I grew up. I knew if I wanted to teach, then I'd have to do a postgrad, and that meant another year of study, and that just didn't appeal. So I did what any responsible person does. I got on a plane and went to live in Asia for a year. I just got the hell out. Spent my time there, having a wonderful time, but then obviously had to come home, got a job temping as a PA, and thought, hang on a minute, I've just spent 5 years getting this amazing education. I don't know what to do with it. Rang my sister, one of the little Sannyasins, she's not a Sannyasin anymore, rang her, had a moan basically, and she said, you need a change of scenery, come up here for the weekend. So I went to Cambridge, and her husband is very much an entrepreneur. He's had his own businesses on and off for about 7-8 years. We had this massive, very drunken conversation one night, and in the morning, I couldn't remember anything, but he said, check your email. And there was one line, email, Jojo Coco, and I went, that's it. I have to have a chocolate business. I have to be a chocolatier. I've got this passion for teaching. I've got this passion for chocolate. I'm going to do it. So I'm going to leave you with something I made last night in the Travelodge. There are other budget hotels available. This is really easy to do, and I'm going to prove how easy it is to do. What I did was I made, first of all, start at the beginning. The most important part of chocolatiering is the tempering. If you don't get the temperature right, it ain't going to work. If you don't know how to temper, get hold of me through my profile or my website, and I will send you easy peasy instructions. So you get a water bomb balloon, okay, and you dip it in your melted chocolate, and then you let it set. And as you can see, it's gone all the way around. Now comes the fun bit. Hope no one's jumpy. And you take out all of the balloon that might be inside. You don't want to be eating that. Now, I did this for a workshop last July. We were doing, we were celebrating Wimbledon, so we did strawberries and cream. So I took some strawberries and I dipped them in chocolate too, and then I rolled them in some gorgeous decorations. And you can put those inside your bowls, okay? So they're all decorated with yummy things. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And then what you need to do is get a piping bag again. If you don't know, get in touch with me. I'll tell you how to make a piping bag. And then you can pipe different things. So I've done a 4, and I've done an N, and I've done a love heart, and I've done a J and an O, and I've done some flowers. So basically, if you had a dinner party, you could personalise a bowl for each of your guests. If their name's Elizabeth, I suggest you just go for initials. But, you know, you could do something like that. So you can make all these really wonderful decorations really, really easily. And then obviously to finish off, you just need your cream. Okay? So that's something you can do at home, really. Sorry? I might need some volunteers to help me eat it. So you can make that at home, I promise you. It's really, really, if I can do it in a Travelodge bedroom, you can do it at home in your kitchen. So thank you very much for listening. It's been a pleasure.
Smile, be chat, join for networking.